The black Zenith. Everyone overlooked it at auction, until I saw what was inside. The bid counter hit 0, and nobody moved. 400 buyers packed into Hangar 19, all of them holding their numbered paddles, all of them pretending the ship at the back of the room did not exist. I stood near the rear wall with coffee going cold in my hand, and watched a Varric delegate yawn loud enough for 3 rows of people to hear. The auctioneer, a tired-looking man named Colm, tapped his screen and moved on without even finishing the sentence. Lot 7, derelict vessel, class unknown. Opening bid, 4,000 credits. Silence. I had been coming to the Outer Belt liquidation auctions for 6 years. I knew what silence meant at an opening bid. It meant the thing in question was worthless, broken beyond repair, or both. Professional buyers did not waste silence on anything with actual value. They fought over those items before the auctioneer finished reading the description. Silence was a language, and it said, "Stay away." I looked at the ship anyway. It sat at the far end of the hangar behind a cordon of yellow rope, lit by 2 white overhead lamps that made everything look cheap and unloved. The hull was black. Not painted black, not coated black, but a deep, natural black that seemed to pull the light toward it rather than reflect it. There were no visible seams along the body, no exhaust ports I could identify, no registration markings, no manufacturer stamps, no scorching from entry burns. Every ship I had ever seen wore its history on the outside, dents and patches and welded repairs telling you the story of where it had been. This one told you nothing. It was roughly the size of a long-haul freighter, maybe 40 meters nose to tail, with a shape that curved in places no human engineer would have thought to curve. Not ugly, not beautiful either, just different in a way that made my brain work a little harder to understand what I was looking at. The alien assessors had marked it pre-collapse junk on the auction manifest. I had read that line on my tablet that morning, and thought nothing of it. Half the junk at these auctions got labeled pre-collapse, because nobody could date it properly, and pre-collapse sounded better than "we have no idea what this is." I took a step closer. My name is Mara Voss. I am 34 years old. I work as a salvage appraiser for a small firm called Kellner & Associates, which is a generous name for 2 people, one of whom is me, and the other of whom is a 70-year-old man named Kellner, who has not left his apartment on Titan Station in 3 years. I assess value. I look at broken things and tell people whether they are worth fixing or worth scrapping. I am good at it. I am not rich. I have 4,200 credits in my emergency account and a long list of things I was planning to spend them on, none of which involved a derelict ship with no identification. I moved past the cordon. A security guard glanced at me. I held up my appraiser badge and he looked away. Up close, the ship was even stranger. The hull surface had a texture I could not identify from looking at it. It was not metal exactly, not ceramic, not any composite I recognized from the materials charts I had spent the last decade memorizing. I crouched down and looked along the lower edge where the hull met the hangar floor. The fit was exact, not resting, sitting perfectly, like it had chosen its position. I straightened up and walked the length of it slowly. No landing struts that I could see, no docking clamps, no visible thruster arrangement. I pulled out my scanner and ran a basic read along the starboard side. The scanner made a sound I had never heard it make before. Not an error tone, not a failure ping. Something else, something lower, like it was working harder than usual just to look. The readout came back strange. Density readings inconsistent across hull surface. Internal structure not mappable. Power signature, 0.0. The ship was reading as completely dead. I stood there for a moment looking at the screen. Then I put the scanner away and pressed my bare hand flat against the hull. I do not know why I did that. Appraisers do not touch things without gloves. It is a basic rule. But I had left my gloves in my bag, and I was already crouching next to it, and something about the surface made me want to know what it felt like. It was warm. Not warm the way metal gets warm under overhead lamps. Warm the way a living thing is warm. Steady and even across my whole palm. I held my hand there, and the warmth did not fade or increase. It simply was. And then, so faint I thought I had imagined it, something pulsed. Once. Like a single heartbeat under the hull surface, against my hand, responding to my touch. I pulled my hand back and stood up fast. I looked around the hangar. Nobody was watching. The auction had moved 3 lots ahead, and the crowd noise was in the direction of a stack of Varric cargo containers that had gotten a spirited bidding war going. I was alone with the ship. I looked at it for a long moment. 4,000 credits. Every cent of my emergency fund. The money I had been saving for the repair bill on my apartment heat system, which had been running at 60% since the autumn. The money that was supposed to last me through a slow quarter if Kellner and Associates did not pick up 2 contracts by the end of the month. I walked back toward the auctioneer. Colm was moving through lot 11 when I reached him and held up my paddle. He looked at me with the tired patience of a man who had seen every kind of bidder. Lot 7, I said, the black ship at the back. I want to go back to it. He checked his screen. Lot 7 had no bids. It was cleared. Open it again. I am bidding 4,000. The room did not go quiet. Nobody cared enough for that. A few people near me glanced over and then looked away. A Sorath trader 2 rows up turned around and gave me the look that said she felt sorry for me. Colm shrugged and tapped his screen, announced the reopening in a flat voice, and nobody countered. I won Lot 7 for 4,000 credits. My entire emergency fund minus the 200 I needed to cover the tow charge to my rented dock bay. Colm handed me the transfer certificate without ceremony. One of the assistants offered to help me arrange the tow. The Varric delegate walked past on his way out and did not even glance at the ship. I stood next to it for 1 more minute before the tow crew arrived. I pressed my hand against the hull again. Same warmth, same steady presence, and then, again, that single pulse. But this time it came back twice. 2 slow beats, even and calm, like something saying, "Yes, I hear you. I am still here." The tow crew arrived and started hooking up their cables. I watched them work and drank the rest of my cold coffee, and tried to convince myself that a ship could not have a heartbeat. I did not quite manage it. The ride back to Titan Station took 4 hours. I sat in the tow vehicle cab and read the auction manifest entry again on my tablet. There were 6 lines of text. Class unknown, origin unknown, age estimate, pre-collapse, margin of error, plus or minus 3 centuries, structural integrity, superficially intact, internal systems, non-functional, recommended disposition, parts salvage or scrap. 6 lines. That was all anyone had bothered to write about it. I put the tablet down and looked out the cab window at the ship being pulled behind us in its magnetic cradle. The black hull caught no reflections from the station lights we were passing. It absorbed everything and gave nothing back. I thought about the pulse. 2 beats this time. Responding. I thought about the warmth that was not the warmth of metal under lamps. And I thought about the fact that a scanner that had correctly identified 11 different types of alien hull material in the last year had come back with readings it could not map. I am an appraiser. I find value in things other people miss. That is the entire job. That is the only talent I have ever been sure of. I looked at that ship in the cradle behind me, and I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Not hope exactly. Something quieter than hope. Certainty. That ship was worth something. I just did not yet know what. We pulled into Dock Bay 14 at Titan Station just after midnight. The tow crew locked it into the cradle mounts and handed me the release papers and left without a word. I stood alone in the bay with the lights humming overhead and the black ship sitting in front of me in the silence. I walked up to it and put both hands on the hull. The warmth came immediately, and the pulse, steady now, not once, not twice, continuous. A slow and even rhythm under my palms that I felt all the way up my arms and into my chest, matching itself, beat by beat, to my own heartbeat. I stood there in the cold dock bay for a long time. Something was alive in there. Something had been waiting. And somehow, impossibly, it had been waiting for me. I did not sleep that night. I sat in the dock bay in a folding chair with my scanner on my knee, and the ship 3 meters away, and I watched it. Every 40 minutes or so I got up and pressed my hand to the hull, and felt the pulse, steady and unchanged. Then I sat back down. I made notes on my tablet. I drank bad coffee from the bay's vending machine. I watched the clock move from midnight to 2 to 4. At 4:17 in the morning, something changed. It was not a sound. It was not a movement. It was a feeling that shifted in the air, the way pressure changes before a storm rolls in. I sat up straight in my chair and looked at the ship, and the ship looked back. I know that sounds strange. Ships do not look at people. But there is no other way to describe what happened. The quality of the air between me and the hull changed, and the pulse I had been feeling through my hands seemed to reach across the 3 meters between us, and land somewhere in the center of my chest without me even touching the hull at all. I stood up, and the ship opened. Not with a hiss of pressure seals, not with a mechanical groan of old hinges. A section of the hull simply separated along a seam that had not been visible before, and it folded back, and there was an airlock, and beyond the airlock there was warm amber light. I stood there for about 10 seconds not moving. Then I picked up my scanner, put on my jacket, and walked in. The interior was nothing like the outside. Where the hull was cold and angular and dark, the inside was warm and curved and lit from everywhere at once with a soft amber glow that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The corridor I stepped into was wide enough for 2 people to walk side by side, and the floor had a slight give under my boots, like firm rubber. The ceiling arched overhead. Every surface was smooth. My scanner made the same strange sound it had made in the hangar. It could not read the materials. It could not map the space. The internal dimensions on the screen kept flickering and resetting. I walked forward. The corridor curved gently to the right and opened into a larger space, a central room, roughly circular, with a raised platform in the middle, and walls that were solid for the first meter up, and then became something else above that, transparent but not glass, something that showed depth, like looking into very still water. And in that depth, light moved, slow and complex and constant. I stepped onto the platform. The wall depth changed. The light in it organized itself into shapes, and a voice spoke from everywhere at once, low and even and not quite human, but built out of human sounds, like something that had been learning language from recordings. Contact confirmed, it said. Species, human, individual, new. Threshold assessment, initiating. I held very still. What kind of assessment? Basic. Completed. You entered alone. You touched the hull without instruction. You returned twice before entering. Assessment. Suitable. Suitable for what? The light in the walls moved, for being told the truth. That was not what I expected. I looked at the walls and the light moving in them and I said, all right, tell me the truth then. What happened next took 2 hours. The walls became a display unlike anything I had seen in 6 years of working with alien salvage. Not a holographic projection, not a screen, something that filled the whole room, 3-dimensional and precise, and began with a map. The map showed the galaxy, not a rough diagram, not an approximation, the real thing. Every arm, every cluster, every drift of stars laid out in exact proportion, and I recognized it because I had studied navigation charts long enough to know the shape of home from a distance. And on the map, 9 points of light began to glow. 9 civilizations, the ship said. In sequence, each found this vessel. Each was assessed. Each was turned away. I looked at the 9 points. They were scattered across the map, none of them near each other, spanning what looked like hundreds of thousands of years of galactic time. Why were they turned away? They were not wrong. They were complete. I frowned. What does that mean? The map changed. The 9 points each expanded into a brief image, a flash of a civilization at its height. I saw architecture that made human cities look like early drawings. I saw ships that moved between stars the way fish move through water. I saw species that had solved problems humanity had not yet named. Old, brilliant, powerful civilizations. Each reached this vessel after they had stopped changing, the ship said. They were certain of their laws, certain of their limits, certain of who they were and who others were. Certainty is the last stage. After certainty, there is only maintenance. And you needed something that was not certain. I needed something that was still becoming. I sat down on the edge of the platform because my legs had started to feel uncertain. Who built you? The map dissolved into something else. A world, green and gold and complicated, full of life, and a species on it, tall and thin, and moving with a slowness that did not look like weakness but like care. Taking their time with every step. The Arathi, the ship said. They are gone now. They completed, as all things complete. Before they ended, they built me. They called me the Black Zenith. They gave me one task. To find a threshold species. Yes. What is a threshold species? The ship was quiet for a moment. Then it said, a species young enough to still make mistakes, old enough to survive them, curious enough to enter a strange ship alone at 4 in the morning, stubborn enough not to leave when it gets difficult. I looked around the room. How long have you been waiting? Longer than your species has had written language. I let that sit. Outside in the dock bay, through the hull I could not see. The station was starting to wake up. I could hear, faintly, the shift change sounds of maintenance crews and cargo movers starting their rounds. Ordinary life, going on without any idea what was sitting in Bay 14. Why me? I asked. Specifically, out of all the humans. You noticed the pulse. Others have touched this hull in the past. Not many. 3, in the last 40 years. They felt warmth and moved on. You stayed. You came back. You spent your emergency savings on a ship everyone told you was worthless. That is not intelligence or bravery. It is a specific kind of attention that is rare even in threshold species. Attention, I repeated. You look at things that other people have decided are not worth looking at. That is exactly the capacity the Arathi were searching for. I stood up. My coffee had gone cold in my hand at some point. I had not noticed. What does the Zenith do? I asked. What is it actually for, beyond finding whoever opens it? The walls lit again. The galaxy map returned, but this time lines appeared across it. Dozens of them, then hundreds, threading between star systems in complex patterns that I slowly recognized as routes. Not random routes. Routes that connected everything to everything else in the most efficient pattern I had ever seen. Not one path from one place to another, but a web. A network. The path, the ship said. 47 gates. Wormhole transit network. Built by the Arathi, sealed at their completion. The path connects every inhabited region of this galaxy. It has been dormant since the Arathi ended. It opens only when the Zenith authorizes it. The Zenith authorizes it only when a threshold species has been found. I stared at the web of lines across the galaxy map. Those routes would cut travel time between systems from years to hours, I said. Correct. And you are telling me this has been sitting here, closed, for longer than humanity has had writing, because nobody who found the ship was the right kind of person. Correct. I looked at the lines. I thought about what it would mean, not just for Earth, for every species in that galaxy trying to cross the distances between stars on ships that were too slow and too expensive and too small. The Varric Compact spending decades sending supply runs to their outer stations. The Sorath hegemony spending half their budget on fuel for patrols that could barely cover their own borders. The smaller species, the ones nobody talked about, living their whole lives on single worlds because getting anywhere else was too hard and too costly. How long do I have before this becomes known? I asked. Unknown. The activation of the access systems in this bay was a detectable event. Someone will have noticed a power reading from a previously dead vessel. The question is how quickly they identify what I am. I nodded slowly. So we have some time. Some. I looked around the room one more time, at the amber light and the moving depth in the walls and the map of the galaxy spread across the ceiling with its web of sleeping routes. All right, I said. Show me everything. The walls began to move. By the time the dock bay door alarm beeped at 8 in the morning, I knew 3 things I had not known the day before. The first was that the Black Zenith was not a ship in any way I had previously understood the word ship. It was something older and more complex. A machine built for a specific purpose over a span of time so long that the civilization that built it had completed and ended before it was finished. Everything inside it was built for one function, and that function was what I was sitting in the middle of right now. The second was that somewhere in the archives the Zenith had shown me, there was a record of every contact it had made with every civilization that had found it, and those records showed that the 9 civilizations had not simply been turned away. Each of them had been watched, assessed, and each of them, at the point of assessment, had done the same thing. They had sent their best people, their wisest leaders, their most experienced pilots. They had approached the Zenith as a problem to be managed by the right expert. And every time, the Zenith had waited until those experts arrived and then gone dark. The pulse ceasing, the warmth fading, the airlock sealed. The Zenith had never opened for an expert. It had opened for a salvage appraiser who couldn't sleep and spent her emergency fund on gut feeling. The third thing I knew was that the dock bay alarm beeping at 8 in the morning was connected to the external camera feed, and the external camera feed was now showing 3 vehicles pulling up to the entrance of Bay 14, and those vehicles did not belong to anyone I knew. I looked at the ship. You knew they were coming. I detected communication traffic flagged to this location beginning 4 hours ago. The power signature of my access systems is distinctive to those who know what to look for. Who knows what to look for? The Varric Compact has maintained a file on this vessel for 2 centuries. They have been searching for me. They did not identify me in the auction because my hull masks my signature when I choose. I chose to allow a low-level pulse read this morning. A test. I stared at it. You let them find us. I let them find the location. What they find when they arrive is your decision. I looked at the dock bay door, then back at the ship, then at the camera feed showing the 3 vehicles and the people getting out of them. Calm, organized, wearing the deep blue coats of Varric Compact diplomatic staff. How many people are about to knock on that door? I asked. 17, including 2 from the Sorath hegemony, who arrived independently, and 1 from a group you have not encountered yet. What group? They call themselves the Remnant Collective. They are the descendants of one of the 9 civilizations I turned away. I sat very still for a moment. Then I stood up, straightened my jacket, and walked toward the door. I had bought this ship for 4,000 credits. Whatever was about to happen, it was mine. The first knock came before I reached the door. Not a polite knock. The kind of knock that announces itself as not really a request. 4 heavy hits in quick succession, precise spacing, the way someone knocks when they have been trained to knock and expect the door to open. I stopped 2 meters short of the door and crossed my arms and waited. The knock came again. I pressed the intercom panel. Bay 14 is private property. State your business. A pause. Then a voice came through the speaker, smooth and careful, and slightly too formal. The kind of voice that had been trained to sound reasonable, even when it was not. My name is Aldrich Hune. I represent the Varric Compact Office of Cultural Preservation. We have reason to believe that a vessel of significant historical importance was transferred to this bay late last evening. We would like to discuss the matter with the current registered owner. I looked at the camera feed on my tablet. Aldrich Hune was standing directly in front of the door, hands clasped in front of him, wearing a deep blue coat with gold trim at the collar. He was tall, perhaps 50 years old, with the kind of posture that said he had never once in his adult life been told to wait. Behind him, 2 assistants held tablets. Behind them, 2 more people who were not assistants and who were not holding tablets. You can discuss it from there, I said through the intercom. This is a registered salvage bay. Entry requires my permission. Another pause. Longer this time. Ms. Voss, we are aware of your purchase at last evening's auction. We are also aware that the vessel you acquired may be operating in ways you did not anticipate. We are not here to challenge your ownership. We are here to ensure your safety. My safety is fine. Miss Voss, Mara, I said, and I would like to know how you know my name, given that I only registered this bay under my firm's name. No pause this time. That was interesting. He had an answer ready. Kellner and Associates is a registered appraiser firm. Your personal details are linked to the firm registration. Standard lookup. Standard lookup did not explain the 2 vehicles that were parked at the side of the building rather than in front, which I could also see on the camera feed. 4 more people in those vehicles, not moving, waiting. I stepped away from the intercom. I turned and looked at the Zenith sitting in its cradle in the middle of the bay. Can they get in without me? I asked quietly. No, the ship said. The access systems are keyed to your biometrics now. That occurred when you first entered. No other biological signature can activate the airlock. What happens if they force the bay door and get in anyway? They enter a bay with a ship that will not open. They have done this before. 3 times, in the last 2 centuries, Varric investigators have examined my hull. Each time they found a ship that read as entirely dead. They know you are not dead now. They know a power signal came from this location. They do not yet know for certain that I am operational. They are guessing. I thought about that. Then I walked back to the intercom. Mr. Hune, I am going to open the door. You may come in, alone, and we can talk. Anyone who is not you stays outside. A longer pause. I watched his face on the camera feed. Something moved behind his expression. The calculation of a person deciding whether to accept terms that were less than what he wanted, or push for more and risk getting less. Agreed, he said. I opened the door. Aldrich Hune stepped into the dock bay and stopped. He was looking at the Zenith. Whatever he had expected to see, the reality of it standing there in the bay under the station lights had struck him somewhere he had not prepared for. His professional composure held, but I could see him work to hold it. The small tightening around his eyes, the slight pause in his breath. You bought this at auction, he said. It was not a question. For 4,000 credits, I said. Yes. Do you know what it is? I am beginning to. He turned to look at me. Up close, his eyes were careful and intelligent and tired in the specific way of a person who has spent a long time looking for something. The Varric Compact has been tracking this vessel for 218 years, Ms. Voss. We lost the signal 30 years ago when it stopped emitting. We only picked it up again this morning. What do you want from it? He was quiet for a moment, looking back at the ship. Answers. The Varric Compact traces our heritage to a civilization that existed long before the current era. We believe this ship was built by the Arathi. We believe it contains a record of what happened to every civilization that interacted with it, including ancestors of our own species. You want the archive? He looked at me sharply. You have accessed it. It was not a question either. I had said too much. I shifted slightly and kept my face still. I have been inside the ship. It opened for you. He said it slowly. The way someone says something they have been told was impossible for 200 years and are now watching happen in front of them. It did. He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was a shade quieter. The Compact would like to purchase this vessel. Whatever you paid at auction, we will multiply it. Significantly. It is not for sale. Ms. Voss. Mara. And I heard you the first time, Mr. Hune. The ship opened for me, not for the Varric Compact. I do not think selling it changes that. Do you? His jaw tightened slightly. He had good self-control, but not perfect self-control. What are you planning to do with it? I am still figuring that out. The Sorath hegemony is outside, he said. They are not as patient as I am. I noticed their vehicles, I said, and the 4 people sitting in them who are not diplomatic staff. Something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe, or reassessment. You are more observant than the auction record suggested. I am a salvage appraiser. Observant is the whole job. The dock bay intercom clicked. A different voice, harder, and with less patience built into it. This is Commander Rael Sor, Sorath Hegemony Operations Division. Ms. Voss, we know the vessel in your bay is the Black Zenith. We are asking you to open the bay door fully and permit a joint inspection team to... I pressed the intercom mute. I looked at Aldrich Hune. You can go back outside now. I need to make a call. He looked at the ship one more time. His expression was complicated, not hostile. Something more like grief. If you are truly the person it opened for, he said, please be careful. There are others besides the Compact and the Hegemony who have been looking for this for a very long time. Some of them are not interested in conversation. He walked out. I closed the door and locked it. I stood in the middle of the bay with the Zenith at my back, and the sound of Commander Rael Sor still trying to reach me on the muted intercom, and I thought for about 30 seconds without moving. Then I turned on the intercom again, not to answer the outside, but to address the whole bay. I need you to broadcast on the public station channel, I said to the Zenith. I want to make an announcement. Confirmed. Channel is open. I took a breath. This is Mara Voss, registered owner of the vessel in Dock Bay 14, Titan Station. I am making this statement on public record. The ship in this bay is privately owned salvage, legally purchased, registered under Kellner and Associates. Any attempt to enter this bay without my permission will be treated as unauthorized access to private property under Titan Station charter law, and I will be recording all such attempts. I am happy to speak with representatives from any organization, one at a time, through the intercom. I am not happy to be surrounded in my own bay by people who have not introduced themselves. Whoever you are outside, you now have a choice. Back off to a respectful distance, or this conversation becomes a very public one very quickly. I released the intercom button. From outside, I could hear the muffled sounds of people talking. Engines. Movement. I watched the camera feed. The Sorath vehicles backed up, not far, but enough to clear the immediate entrance. The Varric staff reorganized to a cluster 20 meters out. And then, from the far edge of the camera frame, a third vehicle that had not been there before. Smaller, older. It sat quietly at the edge of the lot, and nobody got out. That was the Remnant Collective, I realized. Whoever they were. The Zenith spoke without me asking. You handled that well. I got lucky, I said. No, the ship said. You read the situation accurately and responded in proportion to what was needed. That is not luck. I sat down on a crate and looked at the door. I need allies, I said. I cannot hold off 3 different galactic factions from a dock bay on Titan Station by myself. No, the Zenith agreed. You cannot. What do you suggest? The Remnant Collective has been waiting at the edge of your camera range without making a move. Every other party has announced themselves, demanded something, or positioned people strategically. The Remnant Collective is sitting in a vehicle doing nothing. Consider what that tells you. I looked at the camera feed. The small old vehicle at the edge of the lot, sitting still. They are not here to take anything, I said slowly. They are here to see if I get through the first part. Yes. I stood up and walked back to the intercom. I found the public bay address system and switched to a short-range channel. To the vehicle at the far east end of the lot. If you want to come in, the door is open for the next 2 minutes. 30 seconds passed. Then a single figure got out of the vehicle and walked toward the bay. No rush, no hesitation, just a person walking toward a door that was open. I watched them come. Middle-aged, I thought, moving with the kind of ease that comes from accepting a long time ago that things will be difficult and deciding not to fight the difficulty, wearing ordinary clothes, carrying nothing. They stepped into the bay, and the door closed behind them. I looked at them. They looked at me. Then they looked at the Zenith, and something happened in their face that I will not forget. It was not shock. It was not excitement. It was the expression of someone who has spent their whole life hearing about a thing, and now finally understands that the thing is real, and the understanding is heavier than the hearing ever was. My name is Owen Darce, they said. I am the second-generation coordinator of the Remnant Collective. My grandfather's grandfather was on the crew of the ship that found the Zenith 111 years ago. What happened to them? I asked. Owen Darce looked at the ship for another moment, then at me. They touched the hull, he said. They felt the warmth, the pulse. They reported it back to their government, and their government sent a delegation. A proper one. Officials, scientists, a military escort. And the ship went dark, I said. For 2 years, he said. And then it was gone. The signal vanished. They searched for decades. The search was part of why my people's government eventually collapsed from overextension. We lost a great deal chasing this. He paused. I am not here to take it. I want you to understand that. I am here because my collective has kept a record of everything the original crew reported. Everything they felt before the delegation arrived. The pulse, the warmth, the way it responded to individual touch. Why bring that to me? He looked at me with an expression that was entirely simple and completely serious. Because you are the first human who has ever been inside it, and I want you to know that whatever it shows you in there, whatever it asks you to do, the people whose whole history was changed by this ship are asking you please to be someone worth waiting for. The bay was very quiet. I looked at Owen Darce. I looked at the Zenith. I will try, I said. Owen Darce nodded once. That is all we asked, he said. That is all we ever asked of anyone. Outside, the Varick Compact and the Sorath Hegemony were still there. 2 factions with centuries of history and significant resources and strong opinions about what should happen next. And I was a salvage appraiser from Titan Station, with 4,000 credits gone and a ship that nobody had been able to open in longer than my species had been reaching for the stars. The Zenith pulsed once, steady and clear, against the wall of the bay. I felt it in my chest from across the room. There was no going back from here. I had known that the moment I pressed my hand against the hull in the auction hangar. I had known it before I placed the bid. I had known it, if I was being honest with myself, the moment I crossed the cordon and crouched down and looked at that ship up close and felt something look back. The question was never whether I was going to do this. The question was whether I was going to do it right. The Sorath Hegemony did not wait. I found that out at 9:42 in the morning, when the dock bay's external alert system lit up red, and the camera feed showed Commander Rael Sor walking toward the door with 6 people behind him, and no expression on his face that suggested he was planning to knock this time. I was on the phone with Titan Station Port Authority when it happened. I was halfway through explaining the situation to a tired-sounding officer named Greta Finn, who kept asking me to confirm the vessel registration number. I hung up. They are going to force the door, I said. Yes, the Zenith said. Can you do anything about that? I can seal this bay at the structural level. It will hold indefinitely against any tool set they have brought with them. But it will also trigger the station's emergency systems, and Port Authority will respond. Do it, I said. The bay hummed once, deep and low, and the walls seemed to settle into themselves. On the camera feed, Commander Soar reached the door and pressed what I recognized as a portable override device against the panel. The door did not respond. Soar looked at the door. He looked at the device. He looked at the door again. He said something to the person next to him that I could not hear. My intercom buzzed. "Miss Voss, this is Commander Soar. I want you to understand that this approach is not my preference. The hegemony has a legitimate claim to any artifact of the pre-collapse era, found within what we consider our historical territory. The outer belt falls within that territory. Titan Station is not hegemony territory," I said, "and neither is this bay. The artifact is. The artifact is mine under salvage law. You can dispute that in front of a Titan Station trade magistrate. The office opens at 10. Silence. Owen Darce was sitting on a crate near the wall, watching all of this with the same quiet steadiness he had shown since he walked in. He had not said much since our first exchange. He drank the coffee I had offered him from the vending machine and watched and waited. "How bad does this get?" I asked him. "Depends on what you do next," he said. "That is not very helpful." "It is accurate, though." I turned back to the intercom. "Commander Soar, I am going to say something and I would like you to actually think about it before you respond. The ship in this bay has been searched by your people before. By the Compact's people too. Multiple times. Neither of you ever found anything because the ship did not want to be found. Today it is found. You are standing outside a bay that you cannot open, containing a ship that will not respond to you, talking to a person who is not going to sell it or hand it over. You could escalate this. You could call in hegemony assets and create an incident on a neutral station, and spend the next 3 years fighting legal challenges while I do whatever I want with the Zenith. Or," I paused, "or you can stand down, go back to your vehicle, and wait 2 hours, and I will open this door and talk to you properly. All of you, at the same time." A very long pause. "All of you," Soar said, "including the Compact." "Including the Compact. And the Remnant Collective." Another pause. "Why the Collective?" "Because they earned it," I said. 2 hours. I clicked off the intercom before he could answer. I looked at Owen Darce. He was looking at me with an expression I could not quite read. "You are either very confident, or very good at pretending to be," he said. "Mostly the second one," I admitted. I turned to the Zenith. "I need to understand something before I talk to them. You showed me the path last night, the network, the routes. You said it opens only when the Zenith authorizes it. What does authorization actually look like? What do I have to do?" The amber light in the walls shifted. The galaxy map appeared again, quiet and precise above us. "There is a process," the Zenith said. "The Arathi designed it deliberately. Finding this ship is the beginning. Entering is the second stage. The third stage is a test." "What kind of test?" "A scenario. A simulation. A problem. The Arathi designed it after studying every civilization they could find. They wanted to know how a threshold species would handle an impossible situation. Not a battle, not a puzzle, a moral problem with incomplete resources and no perfect answer." "Have any of the 9 civilizations attempted the test?" 3. None completed it. "What stopped them?" The Zenith was quiet for a moment, the way it sometimes went quiet when choosing how to say something accurately. They solved it correctly by their own standards. That was the problem. They arrived at optimal answers. Clean, efficient, logical answers. The kind of answers that require you to accept that some things cannot be saved. I sat with that for a moment. And the Arathi did not want optimal answers. The Arathi wanted the answer of a species that had not yet decided what was acceptable to lose. A species that would look at an impossible equation and refuse to accept the terms. I thought about that for a long time. "When does the test happen?" I asked. "When you choose to take it. It cannot be forced. It cannot be scheduled." The Arathi wrote that provision, specifically because they knew that a species under pressure might accept the test out of fear rather than readiness. "What if I am never ready?" "Then the path remains closed," the Zenith said, "and this conversation ends eventually, and someone else, perhaps, in a generation or 2, buys a black ship at an auction." I looked at the map, at the web of routes sleeping across the galaxy, at the 47 points where gates waited, dark and still, for someone to wake them. "Tell me exactly what the test involves," I said. The ship told me. It took 40 minutes. I did not interrupt. I sat on the platform in the amber light and listened to the Zenith describe the gauntlet in precise and careful language, and by the end of it my hands were cold and my jaw was tight, and I was staring at the floor of the ship, because looking at the map while hearing this was more than I wanted to take in at once. A dying star system. Simulated. Completely real in every measurable way, except that the deaths that occurred in it, if I failed, were not deaths that would follow me out of the room when I was done. 9 billion people, 36 hours. Insufficient ships, insufficient fuel, insufficient time. A math problem that every civilization before me had run, and found the same answer. Save as many as optimal resource allocation allows. Accept the loss of the rest. Define what is acceptable. Execute the plan. What did the 3 civilizations who attempted it lose? I asked. The first lost 63% of the simulation population. They considered that an acceptable outcome given the resources available. The test ended when they submitted their final numbers and declared the operation complete. The second? And 41%. More efficient, better resource management. Same approach, same ending. And the third? 11%. Remarkable efficiency, extraordinary planning. They considered it a near-perfect result. The test ended the same way. And the ship rejected all 3 answers. Yes. Because an acceptable loss is still a loss you decided was acceptable, I said. Yes. I stood up. I paced across the platform and back. I do not know if I can do better than 11%, I said. I am not a military commander. I am not a logistics expert. I am an appraiser. I know, the Zenith said. Then why are you telling me I might succeed where civilizations with centuries of space travel experience failed? Because they ran the numbers, the Zenith said. And the numbers told them what was possible, and they believed the numbers, and they built their plan inside the boundaries that the numbers allowed. You have not yet decided what the numbers are allowed to tell you. I stopped pacing. Run the test, I said. The amber light changed. The gallery map disappeared, then the whole interior of the room shifted and deepened, and the walls became something else entirely, a real sky over a real-seeming world, and I felt the floor change under my feet, and the Zenith said, in a voice that came from everywhere and nowhere, 36 hours. 9 billion souls, insufficient means, begin. And I began. I will not walk through the full 36 hours in detail, because some of it is the kind of difficult that does not translate well into words. What I will say is this. In the first 2 hours, I tried to organize the available ships by capacity and fuel efficiency, and run a standard evacuation priority grid, the kind of approach any competent planner would use. The math told me immediately that I could save between 40 and 60% of the population, depending on decisions about who boarded first. That was better than 3 of the previous attempts. It was also not enough. I deleted the priority grid. I spent the next hour looking at the problem differently. Not who to save in what order. What else was in the system that I could use? The simulation was detailed. The Arathi had been thorough. And there were things in that star system that the previous 3 civilizations had noted, logged, and set aside because they did not fit the standard evacuation model. 17 decommissioned industrial ships in a storage orbit around the second moon. Retired, stripped of most systems, not rated for passenger transport. I put people on them anyway and had them piloted manually to the evacuation jump point. An orbital refinery station with a fuel reserve that the official inventory had not counted as available because the refinery was in the middle of a production cycle, and shutting it down safely would take 18 hours. I did not shut it down safely. I vented the active cycle and took the fuel loss and used what remained to extend the range of 6 transport ships that had previously not been able to make the full run. A population of 300,000 in the deep underground settlements of the 4th planet, who had been listed in the initial assessment as unreachable due to lack of surface access during the solar event. I looked at those settlements for 20 minutes. Then I looked at what was orbiting nearby. A cargo transfer vehicle used for asteroid mining. Magnetic grabs. I repurposed it. I broke the surface approach window into segments and ran 4 trips instead of 1, losing 2 hours but getting everyone out. I made mistakes. I miscalculated a fuel consumption rate on hour 19, and 3 ships ran dry 50,000 kilometers short of the jump point. I spent 40 minutes figuring out a partial tow solution that saved most of the people aboard but not all. I went quiet for a long time after that, and then kept working. At hour 31, the star's final collapse sequence began on schedule. I had been running on 4 hours of simulated time pressure, and no sleep, and the part of my brain that does calm calculation had gone offline about 6 hours earlier. What remained was something simpler and angrier. At hour 34, 2 hours ahead of the deadline, every ship I had was through the jump point except one. The last transport, overloaded by 20%, fuel at minimum, carrying a population segment I had gone back for 3 times when the numbers told me I should have written them off on hour 8. It cleared the jump point at hour 35 and 14 minutes. The star went supernova on schedule at hour 36. I sat on the floor of the Zenith with my back against the platform, and my eyes closed, and said nothing for a very long time. The voice of the ship came back, quiet and careful. Simulation concluded. Population survivors, 94.3%. Tell me the number who didn't make it, I said. 531 million. 531 million. Even in a simulation that was not a real number about real people, it sat in my chest like a stone. I had done better than anyone before me. It was also the largest number of people I had ever thought about all at once, and each one was a life in the simulation that had ended when the star did. Is that enough? I asked. For the Arathi's test, is 94% what they needed? The Arathi did not design the test with a passing percentage, the ship said. They designed it to look for a specific behavior, the behavior of a species that refuses to decide in advance how many lives are acceptable to lose. That refuses to close the file on people who are too difficult to reach and move on. That goes back 3 times for a population segment the numbers say is unreachable, not because the numbers are wrong, but because the numbers are not the only thing that matters. I opened my eyes and looked at the ceiling of the ship. And that is the behavior you found, the ship said. 531 million people still died. Yes, and you will remember every choice you made for each one. That is also the behavior the Arathi were looking for. The civilization that treats an imperfect outcome as a wound rather than a statistic. I sat there for another moment. Then I stood up. All right, I said. Open the door. I have 3 delegations waiting. The door opened at 11:42 in the morning. I had taken 20 minutes to wash my face and drink 2 cups of bad coffee from the vending machine and sit quietly in the corner of the bay, while Owen Darce did not say anything, which was exactly what I needed from him. He had been in the bay while I took the test. He had seen me sit on the platform with my eyes closed and my hands pressed to the floor, and he had understood enough not to interrupt and not to ask questions when I came back out of it. He had simply handed me a coffee when I sat down and gone back to his own thoughts. I respected him enormously for that. Outside the bay door, the 3 delegations had arranged themselves in a loose half-circle. Aldrich Hune stood to the left with 2 assistants. Commander Rael Sor stood to the right with a different expression than before, something harder to read. Between them, slightly back, 3 representatives from the Remnant Collective who must have come from the vehicle while I was inside. Owen Darce walked out and stood beside me. I looked at the 7 people in front of me and thought about how to start. I thought about the galaxy map with its sleeping network of routes. I thought about the Arathi, slow and careful, spending a civilization's worth of time building a test for someone they would never meet. I thought about 9 billion simulated lives, and the 531 million I had not been able to save. The Black Zenith has completed its assessment, I said. I have been confirmed as the contact individual for the threshold species designation. I know what that means and what comes next. I am telling all of you this now, publicly and on record, because the next part of this process is going to affect every inhabited system in this galaxy, and I think you all deserve to hear it from me directly, rather than from whatever version of it gets passed around in second-hand reports. Nobody said anything. Sor's expression had gone very still. There is a network called the Path, I said. 47 wormhole transit gates, built by the Arathi, covering the full inhabited galaxy. It has been inactive since the Arathi ended. It activates when the Zenith authorizes it. I have now passed the test required for that authorization. The path can be opened. Aldrich Hune's composure, which had been excellent all morning, cracked just slightly. Not much. A small loosening around his jaw and eyes. When you say the full inhabited galaxy, I mean every major inhabited system. Compact space, hegemony space, Independent stations. All of it. Sor found his voice. Who controls access to the gates? And there it was. The question I had been thinking about since the Zenith first showed me the network. The question that could make this into a war, or something else entirely. The question that every powerful faction in that half-circle was waiting for. I looked at him for a moment. I thought about what the Arathi had left for whoever passed. Not a weapon. Not a strategic advantage. A library. Nobody controls access, I said. The gates open to all. Every species. No fees, no checkpoints, no compact oversight, no hegemony approval. The path belongs to the galaxy. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I had heard all day. Sor looked at me with an expression that was oscillating between outrage and something he could not quite suppress, which might have been relief. You cannot simply... I can, I said. The Zenith is registered to me. The authorization is keyed to me. The decision is mine. I have made it. Hune was very quiet. He was looking at me with an expression I recognized now. It was the same expression Owen Darce had worn when he walked into the bay and saw the Zenith for the first time. Heavy understanding. The Arathi, Hune said slowly. They built all of this, and they left the authorization in the hands of a single individual. Why would they do that? Because they wanted the decision made by one person who had no institutional interest in the outcome, I said. Someone who had not spent 200 years calculating the strategic value of controlling the gates. Someone who had spent the previous day and a half figuring out how to save as many people as possible with the wrong tools and not enough time. Someone who would not see a shared galaxy as a loss. Hune was quiet for a long moment. The Compact will not have preferred access. No. The archive you mentioned, the Arathi records, also open, I said, to everyone. The Zenith contains the Arathi's full history, science, and cultural record. Every translation system they built into the ship can generate public access copies. I am authorizing that release as well. Owen Darce made a small sound beside me. Not quite a word. I looked at him. His expression had moved past all the composure and steadiness he had been carrying all morning, and landed somewhere much more raw and private. The archive, he said. My people's ancestors. What happened to them? The record of their contact with the ship. Yes, I said. That too. He nodded once and did not say anything else, but his shoulders came down in a way that suggested he had been holding them tight for a very long time. Commander Sor had been watching this exchange with the look of a person recalculating. You understand, he said, that what you are describing will fundamentally alter every political structure in the inhabited galaxy. Transit has always been a resource. Control of transit lanes has always been power. You are proposing to make that power universal. I am not proposing anything, I said. I have already done it. The authorization is done. The only thing left is the physical activation of the gates, which will happen within the next 72 hours. I paused. Commander, with respect, you came here this morning to take something. I understand why. Your people have been looking for this ship for a long time. But what you were going to take was not yours. The fact that nobody stopped you on the way here does not make it yours. The path being open to everyone includes your people. That is not a loss. I would ask you to consider whether it might actually be something else. Sor looked at me for a long moment. The hard, unreadable expression did not go away entirely, but something underneath it shifted. I will need to contact the Hegemony Council, he said. Of course, I said. So will Mr. Hune. Take whatever time you need. I turned and walked back into the bay. The Zenith was waiting. Activate the gates, I said. The ship was quiet for 3 seconds. Then it said, confirmed. Authorization accepted. Gate activation sequence beginning. 47 gates will come online over the next 71 hours as power builds in each node. The galaxy map appeared above the platform, the full web of routes, and one by one the sleeping points of light along the network began to wake. Slowly at first, and then faster, like someone walking through a dark house and turning on every lamp. I watched it happen. Somewhere out there, 47 points in the galaxy were warming up for the first time in longer than my species had existed. Ships that were currently crawling across empty space on multi-year journeys would eventually find shorter roads. Species that could not reach each other were going to find that the distance between them had changed overnight. I did not know what came after this. I suspected it was complicated. I suspected there would be arguments and negotiations and political fallout that would take decades to settle. I suspected the Virek Compact and the Sorath Hegemony would spend the next several years adjusting to a galaxy that did not give them the advantages they had expected. I also suspected that somewhere out there, small species on single worlds with one old ship between them were going to find a gate they did not know about, and walk through it, and discover a galaxy that had been waiting for them all along. The last thing the Arathi had shown the Zenith to record, in the final days of their civilization before they completed, was a message. Not addressed to any specific species, not to the threshold contact. Just a message, left in the archive where whoever found it would find it. The Zenith had shown it to me the night before, in the amber light of the central room, and I had read it 3 times, and thought about it all through the test and all through the morning, and I kept coming back to the last line. It said, "We built the door because we knew we would not always be here to hold it open. Find someone who will." I sat down on the platform in the middle of the Zenith, as the gates lit up one by one across the galaxy map. Outside, the 3 delegations were on their communication devices, trying to explain to their governments what had just happened. Owen Darce was standing in the doorway of the bay, looking up at the station ceiling with an expression like a person hearing news they had waited a lifetime for. The coffee from the vending machine tasted terrible. I drank it anyway. Some things you do just because they are familiar, and the world has shifted underneath you, and you need something ordinary to hold. 3 months later, I was back at the Outer Belt liquidation auction. Old habit, new reasons. Kellner and Associates had more work than it could handle. Everybody wanted a second opinion on everything these days. The galaxy was suddenly a more complicated place, and people with the ability to look carefully at things nobody else was looking at were worth more than they used to be. I had a team now. 6 people, 2 of whom I trusted completely. My dock bay had been upgraded to Bay 7, which had better lighting and a real coffee machine. The Zenith was still there, in the back, powered down to its lowest active state. It did not need to fly anywhere. It was the center of the network. It stayed put. I had spent 3 months talking to governments and agencies and representatives of species I had not known existed before all of this happened. I had sat in rooms where decisions were being made about the management of the path, and added the only perspective that I thought mattered, which was, keep it open, all of it, always. So far, they had listened. I did not know how long that would last. In the auction, a crate came in from the far edge of the belt, old, sealed. No markings anyone could identify. The auctioneer listed it as unknown origin, unknown contents, estimated age, pre-collapse. The room moved past it quickly. Professional buyers shook their heads and moved to the next lot. I was already walking toward it. I pressed my hand against the sealed surface. Nothing pulsed. Nothing was warm. It was just a crate, probably full of rock samples or broken parts or absolute junk. But I had learned that the difference between junk and something extraordinary was sometimes nothing more than being the person willing to pay attention. I raised my paddle. Opening bid.